With today's ever-expanding obsession with crossovers and SUVs amongst hybrids and electric vehicles, it seems that the complaints that I hear from most buyers come from one of two different camps. They're either too big or they're too small. So could there potentially be a crossover or SUV that fits everything a buyer could want into one sort of Goldilocks size package, just right? Well, for a while, I've been searching for an answer to that same question, and this week, I think I might have finally found it. What's good, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another car review here on the driveway, where this week we are out in the brand new 2023 Mazda CX50. And the way I'd like to describe this new crossover is that it basically solves all the complaints and sort of problems I had with Mazda vehicles in the past. Or does it? Well, we'll get to that a little bit later, but I know the one thing that's probably going to be complaining more than anything with this particular model is your wallet, because this Turbo Premium Plus we're driving today sits at just over $43,000. That is a huge chunk of money for what may not be very much of a car. However, all of that aside, I want to know, could any vehicle on this earth potentially be just right for the times? Well, there's only one way to answer that question. As any good-natured person will tell you, the word perfect should never really have existed in the English dictionary to begin with. When you call something like a car, a machine, a person, or really any item in life perfect, you're basically saying that it is the best of everything, that there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. So how could I, as an average automotive journalist, say that Mazda has built the perfect small crossover for the times? Well, I'll tell you, it took a lot of thinking, but let me tell you why. So let's start at least with the basics here. The CX50 slots right between the more hatchback-like CX30 and the best-selling CX5. Now, I've driven both of those vehicles a numerous amount of times each, and where this excels over both of those is, compared to the CX5, I have a little bit more elbow room. I always thought the CX5 was a little too narrow. It felt a little bit more compact than it should be. So now I know my elbow can reach over and not hit somebody in the jawline. And on the flip side, the CX30 basically is a hatchback on stilts. And it felt like my butt was still dragging the ground. So where I'm sitting right now in this, I feel like I'm at the perfect height. Not too high in the air, but I'm not too low to the ground either. And while it is a very comfortable vehicle, I will say one thing about this particular model. These seats are incredibly firm, and not to mention, in their artistic way, they put this cross stitch right down the middle. Not to be TMI here, but that cross stitch sits right in my butt crack from where I'm sitting. But as any good Mazda owner or any Mazda fanboy will tell you, like myself, the company doesn't just focus on luxury, amenities, technology, that sort of thing. I mean, believe me, they provide plenty of that in every single one of their cars, at least the ones that I've driven. However, Mazda also has one ace up their sleeve. They want to provide everything I just mentioned with a healthy dose of performance to go with it. And as I said, the ride quality, it's very sporty. You can definitely feel everything in the road. This one also has the iActive all-wheel drive system, so the steering, much more responsive. I get a ton more feedback through the wheel than I thought I was going to. And then, of course, the best thing of all lies under the hood. 2.5 liters, turbocharged, direct injected, 4-cylinder Skyactiv engine with a rather old school 6-speed automatic transmission in the middle. Now, normally that would be an issue for me because the gears in this transmission are rather tall. But then again, it seems to be the only one in Mazda's arsenal that can hold down 227 horsepower and a colossal 310 foot-pounds of torque. But suppose you're feeling a little more adventurous with your Mazda crossover. Well, there's a little switch right down here labeled MI Drive. That is your Mazda Intelligent Drive Mode Select. And you could be normal, like everybody, and just kind of get the best of everything. Or you could really be ballsy, knock the transmission into manual, put it in sport, take control on the paddles, and put your foot in it. Ooh, I love that little turbo whistle. You hear that little right at the end of it. But then, of course, in the back of your mind, you're probably thinking, there is no way on God's green earth that I could spend $43,000 and some change on a small Mazda crossover. You know what? I'm agreeing with you. As much as this car offers, that price tag is way too expensive for the size vehicle that it is. So my recommendation, if you're going to get one of these, you definitely need to look at something a little bit less equipped if you want to stay in a relatively reasonable budget. However, one thing that did sort of sway me a little bit, at least in terms of, you know, value for money and how I feel this car presents itself, is the way it looks. Now, as you guys may have heard in the past, I have pretty much no qualms about Mazda's design philosophy that they impose on every single one of their cars. The Kodo design language is meant to provide a very elegant yet simplistic idea, but giving a much more premium feeling at the same time. And looking at the CX50 as a whole, just based on first impressions, not only does it not look like a small car or hatchback that's been put up on stilts like some of its predecessors, it almost has a much more regal appearance, if that makes sense. The front of it especially, it kind of reminds me of the Mercedes GLB, but with a much more rounded and aggressive looking face at the same time. And speaking of the front, I mean, look at this. You've got blacked out LED headlights here with the LED daytime running lights, high and low beams. Your turn signals are mounted down in the lower part of the bumper, and they sort of have like a fade effect to them. They actually stay on with your LED daytime running lights, but they have sort of a nice fade in and out effect when they're activated. In the corners of the bumper, this may actually look closed off, but you actually have little air skirts that go through the front bumper as well. The grille, as with all Mazda vehicles, is absolutely huge. It feeds all kinds of air into that turbocharged engine up front. Same thing down below, actually. They've integrated a couple more little air inlets here in the bottom, but of course the grille is completely blacked out. I sort of like the inner workings of it, kind of like the Mazda CX-5, but in a little bit of a smaller package. And then this one being the Premium Plus, we have a 360 camera that also comes as standard. But you know, if your first impressions on the styling weren't enough to make you write home about this thing already, well, get a load of this little nerdy fact. The CX50 measures 185.8 inches from nose to tail, which is already making it a very sizable vehicle. But when you stack it up against other Mazda products, things get even crazier because this car is bigger than Mazda's current bestseller. The CX-5, which I absolutely love, have one in the family myself, is around 5.5 inches shorter than this car. And this thing is even more so impressive when you see it's a foot longer than a CX-30. Granted, on that same front, it's about a foot shorter than a CX-9. So again, you kind of see the design and size philosophy that they're aiming for here. And speaking of design, does it not look a little more wagon-esque, I guess? It's not so much a true out-and-out crossover because it does seem that it sits a little bit lower than I would think of in a true regular SUV or crossover. But if you want to talk about eye-catching, look down here, guys. Would you believe Mazda has fitted 20-inch wheels on this fully loaded Premium Plus? I love the black with the machine face on it. The tires are a little bit thin, 245/45 series Goodyear Eagles, and putting such big wheels and thin tires on a car like this, as I said, it does compromise things like the road noise and also a little bit of the ride quality, but nonetheless, in contrast with the ingot blue pearl that we have on this car, these wheels are a very nice addition. And for almost $44,000, if you're thinking that the features are going to be lackluster, well, I would consider rethinking that thought, because the Turbo Premium Plus includes everything in Mazda's arsenal. You want power folding mirrors? You can get that. As you can see, they are dressed in the metallic black. Turn signals on the side with a little reflector here on the end. The Turbo Premium Plus includes blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert included as standard. Also included as standard is the panoramic sunroof. Now, I have not seen a panoramic sunroof on a Mazda SUV in a while. This, I believe, is one of the first that they've offered in quite some time. But also, one thing that they've been offering for a while is the advanced keyless access. I love the new key fob, by the way. You've got the lock, unlock, power tailgate, panic, and of course inside, kind of like a Volvo key fob that I keep comparing this thing to, there is a little metal key blade, which if you come up to the door and pop it open just slightly, you could see there is a little keyhole hidden back there in the back. Now, if you want to lock the vehicle, there's little touch points on the side of the handle. You just lay your finger to it. You can see when you lock it, the mirrors automatically fold in. And if you want to unlock it, well, you just walk up and grab the handle. As beauty is usually in the eye of the beholder, I'll be frank in saying I've never really been a fan of the back end design of a lot of sort of wagon or wagon-esque type crossovers or SUVs. However, and this is not just because I'm a fan of Mazda's products in general, I actually really like what the company has done with the back end of this car, with one big exception. Before we talk about the styling, let's talk about that power tailgate, because yes, it's powered, and for $40-something thousand, you would want all the options, right? You'd want to get the most for your money. However, even being fully loaded in this case, the CX50 does not have hands-free access. I know there are some out there that are either looking to offer it or that already do in the same category, but this car is lacking it, and that is a feature I really would have loved to have seen here on Mazda's newest competitor. However, the styling is very uniquely Mazda. I love the rounded bulbs here for the LED taillights. You have LED turn signals, LED reverse lights. The badging, I think, could use a little bit of work on both sides of the tailgate. I like the Sky Active badge, but things like these little turbo letters, I kind of would have liked to have seen them in more of a blocked out font. Things like the park assist that lines the middle part of the rear bumper, and being that this is a turbo model, of course you would get a standard, rather decently sized dual exhaust. But regardless of whether you look at this thing as a wagon or a crossover, it is still nonetheless a very practical vehicle. Now, to open the trunk, you can use the key like I am here, or you can use the latch just above the license plate. And as the power tailgate rises, you're greeted with a very surprising 31.4 cubic feet of cargo volume, which is surprisingly a few cubic feet more than a Mazda CX-5 with the seats up. Now, as you look underneath the floor, you actually have a temporary spare tire back here, so no fix-a-flat kit under there. I'm really glad to see that. However, this actually loses out to its slightly shorter cousin when you fold the seats down. So you fold down that 60-40 split fold seat. That extends to 56.3 cubic feet of cargo volume, just a couple of cubic feet behind the CX-5. So again, it's not the biggest, it's not the smallest, but still very versatile. Of course, like anybody will tell you, you could make a car look beautiful on the outside, but one thing I've always known Mazda for is some beautifully crafted interiors. And when you open the door to the CX-50, a lot of the parts in here seem, well, rather familiar. But then again, most of them come from their most high-end models. And you can see it in things like the seating details, for example. Full perforated black leather in this case with the beautiful saddle brown accents. And again, that kind of controversial cross stitch that you see going down the middle of the seat that kind of made me a little uncomfortable around my rear end. And it seems that not only the exterior got the Kodo design treatment, because when you're inside the CX-50, or really any Mazda product, for example, you find that there's not a whole lot of excess anywhere in here. Everything still portrays a very elegant yet simplistic ambiance, and you can see it even just looking directly at the steering wheel. The thin leather wrapped rim, all of your controls with the thin spokes in all three sides. I mean, your hands-free radio controls, hands-free Bluetooth, voice recognition, the info button controlling your digital gauge cluster, and on the right, things like your active safety features, your all-speed radar cruise control, lane following, and lane keep assist. Everything is within reach, but nothing is excessive in here.
But if you really want to talk about the most high-tech, or should I say outlandish part of this car's interior, you are staring at it right here. The 10.25-inch high-definition infotainment display. Now I say outlandish because, well, I've had issues with it, and it's not just the CX50, which I've had multiple issues with this particular car, but it has happened in Mazda products before. I've had very strong connectivity issues between Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, even though in the CX50, those functions are now wireless, but I've actually had the entire system shut down and reset while I'm driving, which is a bit of a hassle. But I mean, when you go into the Mazda Connect system just by itself, you have the sort of aging navigation system, which honestly, I'm not a fan of it, but nor am I completely against it. I mean, it's a good navigation system for what it is. However, if you go into the main screen, you could just tap right over and go straight into Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. And another thing that kind of lets it down is the fact that they've split the screen, and because it's so thin and kind of far away, the map screen is a little bit on the small side. However, you do have things like your music functions and other displays over here on the right as well. And if you can reach that far, it is touchscreen, as you can see. On top of the wireless smartphone connectivity, however, the other thing that really works well in this car is the around view monitor. Now I say it works well because the park assistant things are very, very responsive. You can see on the right, you have your 360 camera itself, followed by either your front or rear or side cameras focused in the middle. However, it is a little bit tricky to operate because while you have the car in reverse, say like I do right now, you have to reach over to the left of the steering column and hit the camera button in order to change which camera view you want. And speaking of that button, you can actually activate that system while the car is stationary. You don't necessarily have to put this car in drive or in reverse in order for the system to become active. So nevertheless, it's a bit of an intricate system to use, but I still enjoy it nonetheless. But as much as I love the updated technology in here, one thing remains the same with this car, which is the partnership that Mazda has had with Bose audio systems. And the CX50 carries a pretty good one. 12 Bose premium speakers surrounding the cabin, and trust me, with all the Bose systems that I've experienced before, this one, I'd have to say, is one of the better ones. But going back to that theme of being simplistic, everything from your climate control for the dual zone front system, all the way down to the hidden wireless charger down here underneath this split level center console, I mean, there's really not of anything excessive, is there? Look at the climate control. 2 simple knobs for temperature control. You have these very intricately styled keys that are aimed more upwards versus being a push button like for your heated ventilated seat controls and your heated steering wheel function, just to name a couple. You have a little extra storage here in the front, a couple of decently sized cup holders for some larger bottles. I love the leather wrap shifter knob and the placement of it for your 6-speed transmission. Same with the MI drive button for your 3 selectable driving modes. But look down here, it's not like an Audi where you have like 50 different buttons. Look, scroll wheel, 4 distinct tabs, including your home button, e-parking brake with auto hold, your volume control and radio power, and your button for custom functions. So I mean, how much more simplistic could you get? Now, just when you think you have all the space in the world for you and your friends in something this small, well, this is where the CX50 kind of falls down a little bit. I mean, you can haul kids back here thanks to the ISOFIX child seats right here in the middle. However, as far as seating goes, yeah, if you're a bit tall like I am, this is where you're gonna have an issue. I'm over 6 feet tall. I have that driver's seat exactly where I want it. So when you close the door, it closes with a nice soft thud, but as you do, sitting here in the back behind myself, my knees are firmly planted in the driver's seat. So I would not say this is the most comfortable Mazda SUV that I've ever been in. You do have a map pocket in the back, which is nice. And you also have a 2-cup holder armrest in the middle. But I mean, sitting behind myself, I am a bit cramped, and not to mention with the panoramic sunroof in place on this one, yeah, the headroom is a bit tight as well. However, despite the fact that it is a very cramped back seat, you do have at least a couple of little creature comforts like heated rear seats for your outward occupants and 2 USB charging ports. Unfortunately though, guys, this now wraps up our review and drive of the 2023 Mazda CX50. You know, this car is not as just right as I thought it was going to be, and nowhere near perfect in the same realm. However, if you are looking for a compact crossover that's a little more sprightly to drive, something that doesn't feel as plain or plebeian as the rest of the crowd, this is a very viable option for that category. However, I still have a few question marks here because things like a temperamental infotainment system, a back seat that is way too small to accommodate taller passengers when you have a taller driver, and a few other little odds and ends, well, I think Mazda has some work to do here. However, if you are interested in one of these, I would run down to your nearest Mazda dealer and drive one maybe a little bit less expensive than this one as well. I definitely think it's a good platform, but 43 grand, still a little bit of a sting in my pocketbook. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this review, and if you did, give this video a thumbs up, and also while you're at it, hit the subscribe button down below. I always appreciate the support, and trust me, it makes me want to keep doing videos like this for you guys in the future. A huge thanks goes back to Mazda USA for lending us the new CX50 to drive around. But at the end of the day, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see y'all next time. Take care, everybody, and stay safe.